One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Welcome to One Step Ahead Radio. This is another week, another session of One Step Ahead Radio, one of the best sustainability updates out there. James and I have been discussing what are the interesting topics for this week. James, welcome again. I mean, you are co-hosting this, so it's not welcome to you. You are here, isn't it? Yeah.
Welcome to you, Sasha. Good to be.
Thank you.
Good to speak to you. Thank you. Welcome to you to the show.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Look, I mean, we had just a short conversation before. I mean, I'm getting a bit almost sarcastic about what's being reported around in the world regarding the climate change. And I'm also becoming a bit scared that there is so little response generally around this. I mean, there are no big statements from the UN or World Health Organization or, I mean, given what's going on, I mean, it should be something that should get more attention, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you're referring to, I mean, I don't know how many years ago people had never heard of Copernicus. And now It seems like every month, like the Copernicus update from the Copernicus Climate Change Service, European based, they give these long-term climate statistics and monitoring and what's happening. And, it seems to just become one of those headlines that you kind of see and you sort of say, oh, yeah, okay, here's, we're over 1.5 degrees now. So this was, you said the news about they've announced the results from the global average for April 2025, which was the second warmest April globally, with an average surface air temperature of 14.96 degrees Celsius. But interestingly, importantly for us, it was 1.51 degrees above the estimated long-term pre-industrial average. The 12-month period that we've just been through was on average 1.58 degrees. So we're not just like around or near. I mean, the famous 1.5 degrees from the Paris Accord was kind of like, if possible, keep below 1.5. And that was only 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of sailing through that.
Yes, we are.
People seem to be going, well, okay, no, we didn't really expect to, then we'll go and see what's next, 1.7, 1.9 or 2 or whatever, without realizing that every incremental, 0.1 is kind of, is a severe deterioration of the situation.
It's uncharted. I think what scares me is a bit like people are shrugging their, I mean, not people in general. I guess people are just trying to understand and maybe do, manage their day-to-day life. But it's uncharted territory. We don't know what the consequences really are. I mean, we can see some of these things up in the Arctic and in terms of the melting in Greenland and so on. And we can see the heat waves in Southeast Asia and India and Pakistan and Japan and other places. But it's sort of this human thing about adapting. We do adapt to everything. And I guess that's what people think also, that eventually we will adapt. But the cost for that adaptation will be tremendous. And I don't really think that, we are capable probably to process and understand what will it actually mean for our day-to-day life. It will change, I think. And as,
and probably already changing, I mean, for a lot of people. But as you say, kind of people adapt and kind of find a way to get around, it, but, to live with it and to adapt it and say, well, this is just, and very few people, I guess, as a percentage, have that kind of extreme difficulty in which they suffer directly, or even at that point they don't correlate it to climate change.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that from political sort of a point of view, and you can clearly see that the agenda has shifted, of course, due to geopolitical situation and so on. But what is interesting is the sort of a absence of political debate about this as well around the world, because it seems that politicians are reflecting the the other priorities that the populace has, which is more an economy, inflation, and getting sort of a day-to-day life to work, not really taking on the this tremendous risk that this is creating. And I also think it's another sort of observation from my side is, of course, the millions of people around the world that are really much affected by this are not living in developing countries. They're living in developing countries. They're not living in the developed world, which means that the impact on their lives is quite severe, and we don't see that.
Mm. I mean, you say that the politics isn't really seem to be, but politics is kind of taking it in a completely different direction, because I mean we've got quite a few news items we were looking at before around the UK, and there's been this incredible story and political storm blown up in the last 2 weeks, I guess, by the comments coming from Tony Blair, who's obviously former prime minister, but in the UK a hugely divisive figure. And obviously he was a Labour prime minister, and now we've got a new Labour government, and he in a foreword to a document said people were being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. And he said any strategy based on either phasing out fossil fuels in the short term or limiting consumption in the strategy is doomed to fail. And you know, in the UK media, this was presented as Tony Blair says, net zero is doomed to fail. So I know that seems to, and obviously a huge hoopla about that politically, and well, just before they had local elections in the UK. So. And that's a very big issue. So I don't know whether people kind of say doomed to fail and are starting to get convinced by that kind of logic and narrative, especially when it comes from somebody so-called authoritative on the topic.
Former highest representative for a country stating these kind of things. But it's also, they pivot to this, many of these people making these kind of statements, they pivot to this fear of economic sort of a security that people think it has nothing to do with the climate change or the changing environment, which is of course interesting if you look at the price of coffee beans around the world and also the reasons why they are getting so expensive. It has nothing to do with the trade war. It has to do more with the fact that climate droughts related sort of the consequences of climate change are creating conditions that are quite difficult for coffee producers around the world. So that's sort of one of the examples where this economic security that they are pivoting to is not taking into account externalities economy is dependent on. James, what's going on in the UK with the Orsted the company? They are abandoning some sea wind. I mean, this is a big thing because they are the leading sort of a renewable energy company in the world.
They're a huge. It's a Danish company that basically walked back this week and abandoned its plans to develop a huge offshore wind farm in the North Sea that would have been big enough to supply 1 million homes. So I think it's Hornsea is the one. And the way, apart from the fact, again, turning back to the political angle, the way it's been commented on, it's not just, I mean, they're citing various cost factors in their financial decision to not go forward with it. Supply chain costs coming through, interest rates. They don't see the return on investment that they had wanted or that they had expected to have from it. But again, talking about the political dimension in the UK, the new Labour government has tried to, or certainly during the election, talked up its whole green transition plan and wanting to make the UK grid basically clean by 2030, which is around the corner. And this one decision, is leading people to put into question whether that's a viable
option at all.
and whether they're going to stick to it or have to row back on that. So it's nice to say 2050 is a long way away, but 2030, you started to make these commitments, and you have to, you've only got a certain number of months, and a government is dependent on big financial decisions being made by big players about whether that's actually going to turn in. So there's also questions around how the UK is structuring its auctions for wind development onshore now as well as offshore. So the government certainly has to think about how it's incentivizing and encouraging this industry, which has obviously got big problems globally. It's suffered a lot compared, for example, to solar in the last in the last few years. So that was a big setback. But at the same time, we see step forward, step backwards. The UK set up a new wealth fund. The UK's National Wealth Fund, and is investing more than £600 million, so that's about $800 million in the energy grid as part of its broader funding plan to boost infrastructure needed for the clean energy transition. So this is going to Scottish Power, which is part of Iberdrola, the Spanish group.
This is a welcome development, because that's really needed. I mean, grid capacity across Europe still needs to improve, and this is a very good move, I think, by a wealth fund in the UK doing this. Yeah,
exactly. So again, the UK is a kind of a bit of a microcosm of what's happening more widely around the nexus between, climate change impacts, business decisions, and government incentive. Because you also flagged to me the article giving the statistics on the impact of home insurance, storms hitting the UK.
In that article, it's quite obvious that, people will have in UK big difficulties to cope with the increased cost. And this is sort of the signals coming out of the insurance industry to the financial sector, and also in general, I think, to the politician is that something needs to be done in this context, and it's not being done. And the question is, at the end of the story, who will pay? And it will be the homeowners and people that have property and not ability to protect themselves. So the question is, and this goes back to another sort of interesting topic that has come up this week as well, related to Spain, and that Spain will use its military budget to cover the costs related to droughts and to flooding and disasters in Spain. And this is a quite significant amount of money, James, that they will take from a military budget to cover this. Do you think this will be sort of the scenario that will play out in many other countries, I guess, in Italy and Sweden and many other places as well?
I think the color of the government of each nation hugely determines how they're going to spend this extra, so-called defense spending that was announced, and that the EU and the German government, for example, had proclaimed, and also in Germany when they decided this, when it was in February, they had that discussion with the Greens about how much actually goes into defense and how much goes into climate-related infrastructure spending. So I think you won't see it very much in Italy with the Meloni government. In fact, yesterday in Parliament, trumpeting that during the course of 2025, Italy will reach 2% of spending on defence, as proclaimed by, or as required by NATO membership, which is Italy's long been a laggard on that. And obviously the closeness between Meloni and Trump is the other end of the spectrum between Sanchez and Trump. So, and Sanchez lives in a country where they've had, wildfires and they've had storms. And so he says, what we need our military to have equipment to deal with the effects of climate impacts and storms and fires and so on. So it's within Europe, it's very much each country, it's how they spend this money, and European funds is obviously a very political decision and statement and signal. So each country will bend the rules the way they have their local interests.
Yes.
But yes, after what's happened in Spain in the last not only just the blackout, but with the floods last year. It's a very sensitive topic, and also, like the UK, a very interesting microcosm to keep watch on.
James, is so interesting. And I'm thinking about when we talk about military spending and spending related to climate change, what's going on in the US with 6 environmental mapping tools the White House does not want you to see. This is related to environmental protecting agency, basically work done on the air pollution and many other things in the US that has been dismantled now by the government and forbidden. And I can tell you a bit of a funny story around this because it was broadcasted in a big Swedish media outlets. It is requirement by American embassy in Stockholm to local authorities regarding the diversity and inclusion issues, including the climate change, not to be mentioned or taken into account when any of the purchasing is done. Any of the purchasing sort of a process is done with the American embassy, putting the request to a Swedish local government to adhere to the president's letter on this. I mean, sort of a making science disappear, or making it shut up, or trying to sort of block the sites so people don't see what the situation really is. It looks to me more and more as U.S. is really embarking on very deeply authoritative way of dealing with its own citizens, as many other countries in the world are doing. I don't think that this is, making sort of a science disappear. It's not going to work. It's going to create completely, I think, different mechanics at the end. But I'm also thinking, James, if you're a scientist, if you're working in this field as a sustainability professional and you are seeing what's going on, I mean, I'm posing that question to myself every day, but I'm posing it to you as well. So where do you find your strength? Where do you find your motivation, which we have been discussing previously as well? How to give people hope, and any thoughts about that will be welcome from your side. I mean, could be personal, it could be professional, it doesn't matter, because I think we need to share some hope to people working in this space.
Yeah, I think again, what we've been kind of talking about, and also what the news flow is, it's hugely dominated by a few individuals who have come to power in the last few months in various countries, and Donald Trump in particular, who are dominating the headlines, the news flow, the action, the story, and it seems to be every twist and turn of whatever they deal with, the media kind of focuses on that. And I think you have to remember a country like the US, half of the country didn't vote for whatever it was, 49 years. It's very divided. And the way the new administration has come to power is and is executing his power is very monumental and monolithic. But I think in a country like the US, people are so inventive and resourceful and dynamic. I think there's going to be a lot of self-organizing around this. There's a lot of people who are kind of going to coalesce into sort of more informal or new groupings who will help each other and find ways to do what before maybe they looked to the state, or what the EPA has been doing. So maybe there are many different ways in which climate action could continue and can thrive, and people shouldn't necessarily say, because the central federal state doesn't do it or isn't supporting us fully, that doesn't mean we don't have any arms and any power to, and any agency. So I think maybe below the headline we'll start to see those kind of initiatives come back.
But it was
hopeful. Is that
hopeful
enough?
I think this is very good. This is very good. This is exactly what people need to hear, especially on Friday morning when this is broadcasted. But I'm also thinking, the truth is not always what we think it is in the context of ESG investment, sustainability, and so on. Apparently, in the US, according to that piece that has been published, I mean, 80% of Generation Z is willing to allocate more resources into sustainable investments and impact investing around the world, and it's not really taking the hit these kind of investments in the US. Yes, they do, but not to the extent that people will imagine. So that's also probably a positive thing to bring forward for the next week.
Yes, this is the annual Morgan Stanley survey that they do on sustainable investing, which they seem to be saying people want it and love it and they're interested in it, and they seem to say that they're monitoring continued high level of interest. So it kind of belies the story that comes out about fund flows coming out of ESG. It seems to be that Gen Z, in particular millennials, but even a wider proportional majority of retail, individual people.
Yeah, individual people,
are very enthusiastic about it for a variety of motives, not just social environmental motivations, but even in terms of financial motivations.
Exactly.
Having diversification and different risk profiles.
And I can certainly convince you or tell you, or I don't know if I can convince you like this, but tell you about the fact that sustainable investing, of course, the funds and strategies deployed around the globe today are in many ways better risk protected investments than many others because they are done in a different way. Now, with that said, it does not apply to everything and every investments in this space around the world, but there is evidence in many cases that the risk protection is for investors much, much better. Now with that, I think, James, we have come to the end of this session, and I wish you a great Friday, great weekend, and we'll reconnect next week.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you. Thanks everybody for joining and listening, and we'll catch up next time.
Thank you, James.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.